This episode of the Hotelier Huddle is brought to you by Brand Journey. They provide exceptional brand guest experience design and marketing skills and capability services for independent hotels and boutique groups. Please visit www.brandjourneypartner.com. In this episode of the Hotelier Huddle, I was joined by Andrew Turner, the head of development for Minor Hotels. You'll hear all about his career journey so far, where he's built hotel portfolios from 7 properties worth $150 million to 48 properties worth $1.8 billion. You'll also hear about Andrew's advice for someone with a good idea but no seat in the boardroom yet. And we spoke a lot about the importance of mentors and surrounding yourself in this industry with the right people. It was a great chat with a great chap. Enjoy. Andrew Turner, thank you so much for joining the Hotelier Huddle today. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's nice to see you.
Great to see you.
If it's okay, I'm just going to cover your career journey so far. Not that you need to be reminded, but for the benefit of my listeners to appreciate just how qualified you are to be a member of the Hotelier Huddle. So you are an inductee for the Hotel HM Magazine Hall of Fame recipient of the Hotel of the Year at the HM Awards. You were CEO of Mirvac Hotels and Resorts, which is where I met you, where you grew the business from 7 properties under management with assets valued at $150 million to 48 properties under management with assets valued at $1.8 billion with a B, my dear listeners. Then you were EVP Hotel Management at Silver Needle Hospitality, where you introduced the Next and Sage brands to the market. Then you were VP of Acquisitions Asia from Mantra Group, where you opened the Singapore office and did a whole bunch of deals. Then you were Group Director of Development at Lansmore Group, and now you are Head of Development for Minor Hotels. Have I missed anything?
Well, you missed my primary school, secondary school, university. No, you haven't missed anything. Those are the highlights, I would say. The highlights and the lowlights.
Yeah. So when you and my other former boss, Tim Davis, hired me at Mirvac, I think I was the first person in the organization to have revenue in their title. Thank you for that, by the way.
You certainly were. We didn't know what it meant then.
I didn't know. I was figuring it out as I go. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
So the hotels division of Mirvac back then, you grew that from 7 properties to 48 worth, as I said, $1.8 billion. When you hit, I don't know, property number 30 something, did you ever think, maybe I'll just stop while I can still fit the whole portfolio into one spreadsheet?
Well, I wasn't very good at spreadsheets, so someone else would have had to do the spreadsheet for me. So I had no limits in my mind of how many things fit on the spreadsheet. So it was very easy. But yeah, I mean, it was extraordinary.
Excellent strategy then. That's why it worked.
Yeah, exactly right. But bear in mind that growth was over a 16 or 17 year period. So it sounds a lot, but that's also quite a long period of time. You know, we did grow a lot, and some years we opened 1 or 2 hotels. Another one year we did 9 hotels in 12 months. So it was a pretty extraordinary journey.
I remember.
And we had a great team, and you included, that made it easy to bring on properties. And I've got to say, being part of a large property company was a real advantage, because Mirvac's one of the biggest property companies in the country, and are well known for building houses, industrial, commercial. They were and had a really good team. And the guy who founded it, Bob Hamilton, had such a vision for quality in all property sectors. And I was actually on XCOM, the Mirvac Group XCOM, for 15 years. So I learned a hell of a lot about property.
Made a big difference, right? Big difference.
Yeah, I think so. And that also helped our growth because we were able to develop our own properties. So all the Strata type properties like Key West and Key Grounds were actually Mirvac built properties. So we had our own internal, supply line, so to speak, of properties. But then we also added a number of management contracts. So it was quite a journey, I think. And then could have continued, but then but the the management, as often cases with companies, the management changed. So Bob Hamilton left, and the new guys didn't really understand, put it that way, or didn't appreciate. No,
That's
put it.
often the way,
They might
isn't
have
it?
understood, but they didn't appreciate the value of the hotel business. And Bob certainly did.
Well, and you're right. Had they understood, they would have appreciated. That's how that goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I remember it correctly, or have I got this right in my mind that you did the very first ever Marriott deal in Australia? Was that the College Street Marriott property? Is that right? Do
Yeah,
I
it
have that
was.
right
Yeah,
in my head?
that was the first Marriott in Asia Pacific outside Hong Kong. So that when the City Marriott opened, the nearest Marriott we had
Oh,
is Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was one of only a handful of
wow.
Marriotts in Asia Pacific. Um, so that was quite. And I didn't do that deal. Michael Eisenberg did, who was my predecessor. Was Michael Eisenberg? You would know, and
Ah,
Michael went on to
a core
stellar career
fame.
in Accor and ended up running most of worldwide Accor, including the whole of Asia Pacific. So Michael did the deal with Marriott, so I can't take credit for that. However, it was pretty substantial move for us actually because little old Merv opened the first Marriott, and I mean, we learned a hell of a lot from Marriott. In fact, we deliberately, with their, with their agreement, we copied a lot of Marriott for all of our other hotels, all our Seaballs, Key West. We saw what Marriott did really well, and one thing they did really well was revenue management
Yes.
because Marriott were one of the frontiers in terms of revenue management, and our revenue management was pencil and a piece of paper basically. And we're pretty good at a pencil and a piece of paper, I got to say. However, they took it to another
Yeah.
level, and I think we drew that, and that's when you came on board when we were just rolling out our own revenue management system. But we based a lot of it on what Marriott taught us, but also then I think it was ideas, wasn't it? We introduced as our basis for revenue management. But we learned a lot, but also they actually learned a lot from us. And the guys, the EVPs of Marriott and Washington and like Los Angeles were very, kind and said, like some things you do better than we do, which was quite a compliment. Revenue management wasn't one of them until you took over and took our revenue management. Yeah, yeah. So that was good. But I mean, I think we developed a company with a pretty good culture. We sort of behaved like a little company, but we end up being quite a big company. And part of that was, I'm going to test you here, the Mervac way. Do you remember the Mervac way?
Yeah. The big kahunas. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember the Mervac Way.
So can you remember what do you remember what MIRVAC stands for?
Oh,
No, it's
gosh,
unfair.
no. Oh, I should have looked it up.
Okay.
Oh, oh,
mu
I should have
okay, I'll
studied
tell you.
before this chat, Andrew.
Mutual
Go
respect,
on, tell me.
initiative, responsibility, versatility, attitude, and communication.
Oh, be still my beating heart.
But it worked
Nice,
really well,
nice,
I think.
nice.
And as you said, we had this
Yeah.
big kahuna thing, and every year and there was a recognition thing, of values, so people had to get recognition from their peers in terms of recognizing those values. And every year we had a major event, and we had a big kahuna, and the number of different people who won it was extraordinary. I mean, I think my favorite was one year we had the big kahuna was like a 22-year-old receptionist at a 40-room hotel in
Yeah.
Launceston, Tasmania, and she won the
Yes.
national competition. And you can imagine, I mean, she was, you know,
Yes.
and she was so pleased, as she should have been, to win from that position and that age, to win the whole lot was just extraordinary.
Yes, and quite a few of those big kahuna award winners have gone on to have pretty major careers. I won't name them now. Maybe I'll invite them on the podcast. But they've gone on. I mean, some of them stayed with Mervac for a long time. Some carried on and ended up with a course. Some ended up in pretty major, interesting roles at tech companies and online travel agents. And yeah, I mean, wasn't there a thing? Remind me, didn't the winner of the Big Kahuna Award had to sing or something at the next year's Christmas party or something like that?
Well, that was something I introduced, much to everyone's embarrassment, including the. Well, I think we also had I introduced very early on. Any general managers attending for the first time also had to sing a song.
That's what it was. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. In this different world we live in now, you're probably wouldn't be able to do that sort of stuff. Anyway, it was fun.
Yeah, I've still got, a number of Como ducks around my
Mm.
office. I've got,
Well,
one of the Hotel Lindrum bears on my bookshelf.
oh
I've got
yeah.
Siebel Pier 1 teddy bears. I got all kinds of Mirvac relics around the place.
Well, did you declare them as free gifts, or did you declare them in your tax return?
They were free gifts. Yeah, they were not, they were not, fringe benefits.
Yeah.
Now, moving on from then, I could talk about those days like forever, but opening the Singapore office from Mantra and doing deals across Asia. I'm curious, what's the most, I don't know, valuable lesson you learned about working in that market that would help maybe someone who's just starting out an international hospitality career?
Um, I'm not sure there's one different thing, but I mean, working in Singapore is pretty extraordinary experience because you're moving to
Mm,
a global city there, and pretty well everyone now has their worldwide office, regional office for Asia Pacific in Singapore. So it's a pretty amazing place to work. I mean,
yes.
and a lot of hotel owners are there, so you've got so many decision makers in the same city that you can spend
Mm,
weeks just going one or two stops on the metro to your next appointment. So everyone is there, I think. But I think I don't know. I think from my point of view, we had most of our hotels in Australia, but we then expanded into, Thailand, Laos, and places like that. Um, I don't know. I think the one thing I would say to anyone working that market is it's not one market; it's several. So
yes.
get to know which market. Thailand's very different to Malaysia, for example. So you need to do your background.
Yes.
But and like most things in life, yeah, just talk to people who have done that before, in terms of, okay, what do I need to do? How do we treat people? Do we do things differently here? And they are very, very different, especially China,
Yes.
and especially Japan. It's extraordinarily different, and I was fortunate enough to start going to Japan when I was working with the Hamilton Island years ago. And, you had to do business so differently from our way of doing business that, you just got. It's all come to experience. Getting briefed properly before you get to a new market is really important,
Yes.
and then developing your contacts. That's what it's all about, is getting to know people.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I even had, before I arrived from America to Australia 25 years ago, I had very good briefing and very strong advice that I didn't always take as, you know, often as I should have, but that advice was to listen as much as possible and don't speak as much as possible. Just listen and learn and absorb as much as you can before you try and train anything, teach anything, do anything. Just listen to people as long and keep
Mm.
your mouth shut as long as you can tolerate it before
Yeah.
you try and speak or do anything. And I did, deliver on that advice almost as often as I should have. But to your point about listening and appreciating the nuance, even within Japan, there's different cultural nuances, right? In different
Mm.
cities. And certainly within China, I mean, the way you do business in Guangzhou is probably different to how you do it in Beijing. And
Mm.
even different nuances within Japan, right?
Yeah, no, no, definitely. And I also think, I mean, I think the companies I've worked for have generally been smaller regional organisations as opposed to multinationals, and I think it's much easier to
Yes.
learn and develop if you're or a Mantra or a Mirvac or even a Mine. Actually, mine is actually pretty damn big now. However, you know what I mean. They're not thing, and I think the big companies. And this is one thing I think Marriott learned from us when all that 30 years ago when they came to us and said, well, we're one of the biggest hotel company in the world. You're not. So this is the way, you know, we think you should do things. And then they appreciated very quickly that the way they did things in America wasn't going to work in Australia, and they pretty well learned that from us, I think, that, okay, we'll do things differently here. And
Yes.
that was across all disciplines, by the way. It was like, sales and marketing, even finance to a certain extent, and certainly just relationships were different. So I think that's the bit they got most out of us, I think. But I think if you join a Marriott or a Hilton, then there is such a there's their way of doing things, and I think I found it much better working for a smaller company as opposed to just getting into the mainstream, huge global brand. I think it's very different.
And, on that, Andrew, considering you've worked across several different brands, Minor, Lansmore, Mantra, Silver Needle, and now Minor, each has their own distinct cultures and operational styles. Is there anything that surprises you most about moving between these different brand environments, or is there one thing that you think each one of these hotel cultures gets really right?
Well, I come back to that different point about the smaller companies because if you're working for smaller companies, you can actually participate in the culture of that organization, as opposed to be given the culture,
Yes.
and then you have to live in their culture rather than you creating culture. And I think that we did that very effectively in in Lancemore and Mantra and Silver Needle. And by the way, a lot of the people who worked in those organizations worked through those companies. Like Bob East
Yes.
used to work for me, for example, right? Bob East
Of
then
course.
became CEO of Mantra. Um, Ruin went on to big job with IHG, running Australia, New Zealand, Pacific, and things like that. My current boss is a guy called Craig Hooley. Craig was a junior HR manager
Yes.
at
How is
at
my friend Craig? I remember he was our
yeah.
HR manager in the Mirvac days. His
Well,
office was right next
I've
to
had,
mine.
I'm fortunate enough to have a few people who worked with me at fairly junior levels who then went straight past me, and I've worked for them. So, but I think that's quite a good thing. Actually, it's that old saying, just be careful how you treat people when you're at the top, because you know some of those guys below you will soon be above you, and they will remember that.
That's right. I'm sure he reminds you often.
But I mean, Craig's a good point in that regard. I mean, Craig joined Burbank straight out of the Navy. He was 14
Wow.
years
That's right. Yes.
he was 14, 15 years in the Royal Australian Navy as an
Of
engineer, and
course.
that's and he joined us, and we employed him as a HR manager, and he worked for Mirvac for a few years. Then he moved to the UK with IHG. Then he moved to Shangri-La in Hong Kong. Then he joined Mirvac, so that was quite a journey in that regard. So when I say to people at the drinks the other day, I know work for Craig Hooley, they are remembering a young guy who joined us from the Navy as a junior HR guy, not the guy he is now. It's quite amusing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, throughout that journey so far, Andrew, in those different companies, when you've introduced new brands to a market, like the Next brand and Sage brands, that means convincing, I assume, some skeptics along the way at several levels. So, what's your advice for someone who might have a great idea, either for a brand or a concept or something? So, someone that has a really good idea, but they don't have a seat in the boardroom yet.
Well, I've been very, very fortunate in working on new brands, new projects, and that sort of thing. So if
Mm,
you come back to our previous conversation, I suppose, is you got to listen to people who know what they're doing and have done it before, and absorb lots before you start wanting to try and convince people that you've got a better idea than them. Otherwise, you'll be the young smartass. You know
yes.
what I mean? Nothing wrong with being the like young smartass, but there's a
Better than a
time in
dumbass.
exactly. Smart is good. So, however, I don't know. I've always taken a fairly cautious approach because no one does really like a smart ass or a dumb ass. To be quite honest, you got to
Hmm.
sort of earn
No.
your credibility in some respects. You know what I mean? And you got to
Yes.
how
Yes.
do you do that? You do it by doing your job exceptionally well. People listen to you if you're a finance guy or a GM or a revenue manager. If you're doing that really well, people notice it, and they think, oh God, this person knows what they're doing at whatever discipline that is, and they'll listen to you. They'll say, okay, well, you're a great finance guy, but tell me about this other stuff that you do. You do so. And again, going back to those companies, we developed GMs from every single discipline. You know what I mean? In the old days, when I joined the hotel business, most general managers came from a food and beverage background. Pretty well all of them did, actually. You know,
Yeah.
that's That's the way you came up.
Interesting, right.
And half of the, if you go back to the when I first came to Sydney, aged about, I don't know, my 20s, most of the GMs, the big hotels were German or Swiss. Can you believe it? Yeah, because that was they were considered
Yeah,
to be the
right.
guys. They were the guys that knew how to run hotels, and they probably did in those days because they were very good at food and beverage and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But now we've been some more multidisciplined and that sort of thing. So that's an interesting take. But going back to your question, I think you got to build your own. You got to build your own credibility. I think before you start
Mm,
thinking you can do someone else's job better than they do, or you can introduce a brand, that sort of thing. And I think with the whole idea of introducing a brand, which we've done a few of it in our time, is the brand's got to mean
mm.
something. So that's a collective effort. We can't just say let's call it Key West, or let's call it Siebel, or let's call it Next, or let's call it this. It's got to mean something. What does it mean? Brands mean nothing unless it has
Yes.
some some brand characteristics that make it mean something. Otherwise, it's just one of those hundreds of brands that we have around the world. I won't name any, but every company's got them, which actually don't actually mean anything because they just catch everything. And you know, it's a good distribution story, but as a product, as a brand, it doesn't really mean a hell of a lot. It doesn't really have a lot of credibility, I don't think, because if you look at this one and you look at that one over there, and they think, well, there's no similarities. Why are they called the same thing when they're so bloody different? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I really agree, and it can't just be a price point differential or different room types. I mean, who cares? It has to really resonate differently, land differently. It has to, tell a different story, and it has to make people feel something.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's not really a brand. It's just a logo. You know.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly, exactly. But I think all companies are getting better at that, and you can still have your
Mm.
catch-all brand, but then like your conversation with Andrew, we're getting more into these sort of lifestyle things, whatever that means. No, I sort of do know what it means, but these to me are hotels with personality, and that's which does make it a bit different. And you can have a brand that has quite a broad width in terms of the product, but then you want to have the values that make the brand. So that's to me the important bit.
Yes. Back to you, Andrew Turner. It's all about you. And with all of your awards, your Hall of Fame inductee, Hotelier of the Year, all these career pinnacles, where do you keep all your trophies and awards? Are they like on a fireplace mantle like an Oscar?
How many can you see?
I don't think I see any. No, I don't see
No,
them.
there aren't any there. That's this. This is my home office, and most things you'll see over there are actually are books about scuba diving and maritime history, because that's really my passion, but not hotels. Okay, so that's what that's all
Well,
about
you
over
got
there.
your priorities right. I love it. I love it.
So no, I think I don't even know. They're probably in a box in the garage somewhere, but there's not that many of them, to be quite honest. But having said that, it is nice to be recognised from time to time. I mean, I think that the Hall of Fame thing was about 20 years ago, so I was actually quite a young chap when I got into the Hall of Fame, unlike now.
Yeah, and maybe it's, I find that with acknowledgments of any sort, it kind of fuels your moxie to go on to the next thing and, gives you just a little bit of, gravitas to try something else on. So,
Mm.
um, and having worked across full service hotels, service departments, strata hotels, and various brand segments, like we mentioned, is there one operational reality from any of these categories that you think more hotel professionals should better understand, regardless of where they work? Like, is there anything that you think, some hotel professionals really just need to better understand that you've observed in all these different segments that really needs to be better understood?
In my view, the critical thing is knowing that they're all different. Like the service departments are
Yes.
expanding part of the business, but they are different, especially strata companies
Yep.
where it's a different business model, which are different to hotels. In some respects, resorts are different too, in terms of this. So, I think the main takeout is of it is there are so many different aspects to each of those ones. I mean, at Mervac and at Mantra, we were pretty damn good at running service departments. We made that a
Yeah.
real quality product, I think. And at Mirvac it was great because we built our own service department, so and they were really high quality buildings. Manfred's developed a whole system of looking after property owners. You know, service departments are different in that in one building you've got 100 owners, not one owner. You know, and Manfred were incredibly good
Yes.
at developing a system that really looked after owners. They had a whole department of people. They realised that their customer was, you know, when they had several customers really. One was the owner of the real estate, the other was the, you know, the hotel client. So that was it. And I hate to say it, but in Accor bought both Mirvac and Mantra when you think about it. And I don't think, and they
Yeah.
might admit it, I don't know, but I don't think they appreciate. Certainly when they bought Mirvac, this was a different business, you know, and they couldn't just say we're going to run this business like we run Accor hotels because we've got 2,500 around the world. Therefore, we'll apply our
No.
what we do so well in the rest of the world, and we'll apply it to this business in Australia because we know it. And I don't think it worked particularly well because they didn't really realise that it was
No.
very, very different, you know?
No, and I can tell you, I can attest to that fact because, I was looking after the revenue and distribution management for the, Strata and franchise division. I was, I stuck around for a while as a gift with purchase when
Mm,
Accor acquired the hotels division. And, there was not a strong understanding of the Strata business model, to your point. And it wasn't just understanding the on paper mathematical difference between a pooled inventory model versus dedicated income on the revenue and profit side. It wasn't just that. It was, to your point, about relationship management with 63 different owners at Key Grand for 63 different units.
mm,
It's a
mm.
very different way to run a business, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, when they bought, Mantra, and I don't I've got to say I've got a huge respect for Accor, so don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go at them. I just think, you know,
For
some of the
sure.
larger,
For
companies,
sure.
you know, that don't necessarily adapt their
There's a reason they're
business their
wildly
bit
successful. Yeah.
yeah. You know, they don't adapt their business model to what is a different, business, you know? And I think the other thing that companies often don't do, the larger companies, when they buy something smaller, is that they assume they're better at it, but they also don't often appreciate that the people they're buying the people in the business as well as the business. So if I was buying
Yes,
a business,
not just bricks and
you know,
mortar.
I would say, okay, we're going to take everyone on, you know, senior management, everyone. We're not going to necessarily going to keep them all forever, but we need to keep that expertise. You know, we bought a successful business. Let's keep it successful. And that's by using their systems. You can change them over time, you know what I mean, to adapt to your company. But the people bit is the
Sure.
critical bit, you know. You need to keep all those people. And
The brains that came with it.
yeah, and some of those people won't want to stay with a different company, which is fair enough. But a lot do, and you know, that level of expertise you can't just replicate. You know, you need those people to stay in the business. You really do. That would be an interesting exercise to do to actually do a case study of one company taking over another and be honest about it and say these things work really well. You know, we did a great job of this. We bought well. We did this well. What didn't we do so well? But of course, a company will never ever do an exercise on what they didn't do well.
Well, of course not, because that requires a bit of soul searching as an organization. And it also requires admitting when things didn't go well and admitting mistakes. And not all people and platforms and organizations have the capacity or willingness to do that, right? Because that's the really hard part. And that's where the growing happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when you look back across all of these different roles and achievements, is there a skill or perhaps a habit that you developed along the way that maybe you wish you'd had from day one that someone listening to this conversation, just starting out, that maybe they can develop it right away without waiting 20 years?
It'd be easy if there was one thing I could say, yeah, just do that, and then everyone could say, okay, I'll just do that, and I'll be brilliant.
Yeah, yeah,
But there's not. However,
yeah,
it
yeah.
comes out this has become a bit of a theme of this conversation, I reckon. It's learn from others, you know? And that doesn't mean just to say
Yes,
it's the people you report to, it's the people your colleagues on the same level. It's also you can learn so much from the people at the level below, you know? Like, as you said not that long ago, you just have an open mind, you know, and just learn as much as you possibly can, and not be judgmental about anything until you've really got your position fixed, you know, and it's a well-informed position, in that regard.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's great to have role models. You know, I think, you know, I've been incredibly fortunate in my life to have role models. You know, I mean, and very different. I mean, I worked for Keith Williams at Hamilton Island, right? When he owned Hamilton Island, I was
Wow.
director of marketing. He was thing,
Wow.
and he was a role model for me because he was someone who just did not accept that things couldn't be done. That was Keith. You know, he built the bloody island out of nothing. He built an airstrip. He did everything so extraordinary, so
Yeah.
extraordinary. But as his marketing guy, you know, I couldn't say to him, Keith, it couldn't be done. You know, because he would not accept that. He said, "Well, find a way it can be done." So
Wow.
very quickly, and a few months into the job, I realised no point in saying that Keith can't be done. Just find a way. You know, and if everyone in their career has
Because you knew
someone
what
like,
the answer would be. Yeah.
yeah. If everyone has someone who's totally unreasonable, and again, in this day and age, you probably Keith couldn't act like he did because it just wouldn't be acceptable. However, I
Uh,
reckon that everyone
yeah.
has to have
Yeah.
someone in their career who basically is so demanding, you know, and will not accept a way the answer that
Yes.
you just you know, spend every waking hour, every sleeping hour to finding solutions to things because you know you can't go to your boss and say, sorry, Keith, can't be done. You know, I mean, we had the pilot strike, and 90% of our travel came by air. Right, suddenly there were no planes, and we had an 800 room
Wow.
resort, by the way, so it
Wow.
wasn't little. So we chartered every plane we possibly could. We had the Royal Australian Air Force coming in with Hercules jets full of customers. You know, at one stage, Hamilton was the busiest airport in Australia because we had so many little planes flying people in. But and that was that
Wow.
sort of atmosphere, you know.
Extraordinary.
And the other guy, and I, you know, because I've been so, was Bob Hamilton, who founded Mirvac, because Bob was very, very
Of
different,
course.
you know, very, very gentle man, very smart, but he was so focused on quality, Bob, so focused on quality. That was all about, you know. I'm not having my
Yeah.
Mirvac name on something that's not quality, and he was ruthless in that regard. I mean, he would, if it didn't quite like the design, he would knock it down and start again because it didn't work. I've been very fortunate, but I would encourage other people if I was, and I've said this to, you know, my children, things like that, and, you know, try and find a role model. You know, you really, really think and try and have that experience. You know what I mean? But as I said earlier, the role model is probably easier if it's your boss's boss. But you can find a role model
Yes.
in your department or your hotel. You know what I mean? Just someone who does something really well. You think I've got to learn from that guy or
Yes.
girl because they obviously just know their job and they know they're doing and they're so good at it. You know, and I need some of that. You know, but
Absolutely right. And, you know, my strategy when we were building our team, again, back to the Mervac days, my strategy in building out that reservations, distribution, central services team, which not all my superiors agreed with, was to find and hire people that were smarter than me and disagreed with me, and then just stay out of their way. And trust
mm,
me, people that were smarter than me, very easy to find. People that disagreed with me, even easier to find. and give them jobs and surround myself with people that knew distribution tech, Opera CRS, technically much smarter than me. Just hire them, surround myself with them, and then just stay out of their way and let them do what they were good at. And I learned from all of them, and we built a brilliant team. And,
mm.
not everyone agreed with that strategy, but damn, it worked well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, absolutely. Again, you know, in these more structured times, you know, I think
Yeah,
it's less easy to be like that. You know, you couldn't have guys like Keith Williams around, and you can't have contrarians around, if I can put it that, because if we live in a very different
sure.
environment, and for the better in some respects, you know what I mean. But I think my day or our day were more fun, put it that way. And I think you learn more actually. I
Yeah.
think you learn more.
Okay, my final question for you in closing. We close every single Hotelier Huddle podcast episode with this same question, and it is a final toast. If you are raising a glass Andrew Turner, to celebrate hoteliers everywhere. What is your toast to hoteliers?
Well, my toast would be to the so many friends and acquaintances that I have met over my long journey in this business. So the toast would be to our friends,
Mm,
effectively. And as we were talking just now, we had a bit of a gathering of Mirvac people at the in Manly just last Friday, and I think we had probably more than one toast. By the way,
yeah.
it went on for several hours. But it's just looking around the room, it's extraordinary how friendships have developed over that time. We might not see each other for
Yes.
years on end, but when you get back together in a room,
Pick right back up.
and these are guys, they're not all general managers somewhere. A couple of chefs were there, who'd had great careers in
Yeah,
the kitchen. So, a couple of even I think there might have even been a revenue manager there, for God's sake.
might have been.
No, that would be my toast, and I will toast you. Here we are. This is water, by the way.
I love that.
Uh,
Mine's
I will
iced
toast,
coffee, so, it's still a
yeah,
bit early.
it's been great to know you over all these many years, and really appreciate the opportunity of talking to your many, many thousands, if not millions, of your group.
My fans and followers. Thanks for joining the huddle, Andrew. Cheers.
Cheers, and don't miss the next gathering.
I know. Next one, for sure. I'll be there with bells on. Well, more than bells, but,
Christmas bells.
Christmas bells.
No, seriously, it's been fun.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. See you soon.